as the aging population just continues to absolutely grow and grow and grow, let's continue to educate ourselves on what elder abuse looks like. If you are a caregiver, ask for help when you need it. If you know someone who is a caregiver, offer to give them some reprieve and take a little bit of that burden off of them. So really just taking care of ourselves, taking care of others, staying aware and educated, and just keeping those close connections can really help us age well, live well, and protect ourselves from elder abuse.
Physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation are some of the common categories associated with elder abuse. According to the National Council on Aging, 1 in 10 Americans over age 60, an estimated 5 million elders, is a victim of elder abuse, neglect, or exploitation. On today's Sound Living, the warning signs of elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. Only about 1 in every 24 cases of elder abuse is reported to any agency. And K-State Research and Extension Specialist in Adult Development and Aging in the College of Health and Human Sciences, Erin Yelland, says the actual cases of elder abuse is likely underestimated. Erin, June is Elder Abuse Awareness Month. June 15th is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, and it's really something that we do need to be aware of because, unfortunately, it is something that happens.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we see a lot of elder abuse across our country. It's not always limited to what we might typically think of as abuse. So we see it happening in a whole variety of ways, and I hope that we can really work to talk about that in our country and enhance people's knowledge so that we really can work to prevent elder abuse and address it when it happens.
That's really the beauty of having an Awareness Month and Awareness Day is because it really does put it in the spotlight, and sometimes we need that national and local attention.
Yeah, when we don't talk about things, we oftentimes forget them or it's just not at the forefront of our minds. And so these types of awareness opportunities, having these months where we're talking about this and these special days really opens up that opportunity. And so I'm really glad that there's a lot of initiatives that are going forward to get the conversation started.
One of the things we're starting to see is the fact that we have an aging population and a population over the age of 60 that is really just going to continue to grow.
Yeah, so the population of older adults in the United States is going to outnumber children for the first time in really human history, and that's a big deal. So, we used to have what was called this population pyramid, where we had fewer older adults at the top, and then we had, that middle spectrum of working-aged adults, and then more children at the bottom. And that pyramid is really flattening out to a rectangle. So there's a lot of things that we need to keep in mind with that. Particularly, we're going to have less caregivers for an increasing number of older adults. And caregiving and the burden of that is one of those risk factors for elder abuse.
So what we really need to be doing is not only the awareness, but we also need to be on the lookout and looking for warning signs.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of warning signs for elder abuse. And when we break it down and we're looking at the different types of elder abuse, there are those specific signs within sort of each category. So with physical abuse, you might look for those things we typically think of, like bruises or sores or pressure marks or unexplained broken bones. But then we also have those other categories of elder abuse that include emotional, sexual, neglect, abandonment, financial exploitation, as well as elder abuse scams that can take a form in many financial ways and impact older adults in a variety of ways.
A lot of these are something that really an outsider is going to have to observe because obviously if it's taking place, the caregiver is not going to say anything. So that kind of puts the burden back on the family.
It can, yes. So we know that caregivers and adult children specifically, and spouses as well, are really the number one group of people who are those perpetrators of elder abuse. It's incredibly unfortunate. And so oftentimes when we see reports of elder abuse, it's somebody who is not the primary caretaker who is going to be reporting that. So that might be another adult child who comes to visit from out of town, a neighbor, somebody they are engaging with in the community. Oftentimes it is that outside person who is going to come in and see some warning signs.
So this is something that we need to be watching if we are in a larger family. We need to be sure that we're keeping an eye on our older relatives.
Yeah, so that's a good thing to look for, during holidays or coming together for summer vacations or family reunions. This is a big time for that. So when you are coming together and communicating with and interacting with older adults, keep an eye out. And if you see something, you need to really take it to heart. It might not be anything, but if it is something and we don't do anything about it, then unfortunately, it might just continue to happen.
Some of these you don't really realize until it's almost too late, especially on the financial side.
Yeah, financial abuse can be quick and sneaky and sort of happen under the rug, and we don't notice it, like you said, until it's too late. So oftentimes what we do look for are sudden changes to financial situations, late or unpaid bills, unusual purchases, withdrawals, transfers. You might even notice that someone might change their power of attorney and who is allowed to make financial decisions or have access to bank accounts and those sorts of things. But we also might see people coming in who might act as new best friends or, someone in the family who was never involved before and is now all of a sudden hyper involved in that older adult's life. So you're going to see a variety of different warning signs. But if something seems suspicious or money is missing or objects are missing, start to question that.
The exploitation is normally by family members most often, and then the scams can come from outside agencies.
Oh, goodness. Scams are a big deal across the globe right now, and there's so many different ways that those come out. There's so many different scams. They're constantly changing. But older adults, unfortunately, are very trusting. They may not be aware of all of the different technology scams that can come into their lives. So we see things like the grandparent scam. And unfortunately, this has happened to my own grandmother twice, where someone will call in, they'll pretend to be your grandchild and say they're, in desperate need of help, but they don't want anyone else in the family to know, and they need money to get out of jail or do something like that. And that's a pretty common one. And with older adults typically being a more trusting generation, unfortunately, they can fall for that, just like my grandma did.
So what do you do in an instance like that? I know that you have some expertise, but for people who don't, it's got to be confusing.
Yeah, it is really confusing. And if you're not aware, that's sort of when we start to see those problems happen or just people succumbing to that exploitation. And so, one of the best things that we can do is talk with older adults about that. So perhaps it's not with an older adult in our family, but say that, you have a local resource center or something like that, a senior center, area agencies on aging, someplace that, has a population of older adults, and you can share those resources with them or even call those agencies and say, hey, do you have resources on this? I've been hearing a lot about it. I think it would be really good for older adults in our community to learn more. And of course, working with your local K-State Research and Extension offices, they have a lot of resources and materials available that you can distribute to older adults in your family or in your community or at your place of worship or wherever you're interacting with older adults.
I think one of the problems we often see is the fact that whether it's physical abuse, emotional abuse, the neglect, or the financial exploitation, older adults may be embarrassed. They may not want to bring this information forward, or in some cases kept from bringing this information forward, and that's another issue that we have to deal with.
Unfortunately, older adults are oftentimes hesitant to report this or even talk about it. And one of the reasons why is because most often the perpetrator is somebody in their family or a close caregiver, and they don't want to get that person in trouble. They don't want to tell on them. And so it can be really an emotional struggle and just a really hard question of, should I do this or not? Sometimes older adults don't know how to report it, or if something even is, that big of a deal, they might be telling themselves, oh, it was just a little thing. I'm not going to worry about it this time. So it's really important that we're educating older adults on what this looks like, who they can talk to, that these are serious issues and they deserve to be treated like human beings and not, really be faced with all of this elder abuse.
We also have issues with dementia, Alzheimer's, so that's another area where we need to put some resources and some focus.
Absolutely. So, of course, when we're working with populations that have lower cognitive abilities, they are at higher risk for being victims of elder abuse. And so when we're thinking about physical abuse, there can be a lot more dependence in that way, and that can overwhelm caregivers and just become exhausting. And caregivers need that break. Or if we're talking about financial exploitation and things like that, if we're not managing our finances as well as we once did, or, our cognitive capacity is starting to decline, then we may not notice that we're being victims of financial exploitation. And so as trusting and caring family members, friends, things like that, when we're interacting with older adults in our families or friends, whatever that may be, just really keeping a closer eye out for those individuals who are starting to have changes in their cognitive functioning is really important.
Social isolation is another area that probably Extension does a really good job of trying to mitigate. We have a lot of programs for older adults, but for those who are really socially isolated, that's another problem.
It is, and that's another really big risk factor for being a victim of abuse because, we're not having those connections in the community, or perhaps you don't have as many connections with family or friends. Just being in your home alone and maybe only having a single caregiver or, just a person or two who comes to visit you. And so if you know somebody like that in your community, take specific steps to reach out to them. Or encourage them to look into their local K-State Research and Extension office to see what types of programs are being offered. And oftentimes when we see people who are socially isolated, they may also have transportation issues. And so offer a ride, invite them to go to a program with you, and encourage them to get out and about and connected, and make sure that we're just keeping a close eye on our friends, family, and community members.
We always talk about being healthy lifelong, and that includes, 0 to all the way up to 100 and beyond. And we really want to make those extra years just as healthy as the years when they were in their prime, so to speak.
Yeah, so we shouldn't be diminishing the capacity of older adults. Older adults are such an incredible value to individuals, families, communities. There's so much wealth and knowledge and experience, and just such a pleasure to be living alongside older adults. And what an opportunity to have longer lifespans and just be able to enjoy each other's company for a longer period of time. So really looking at this is just a really great opportunity to, foster connections and just being good human beings.
I mentioned early on that we are an aging population and a population that's going to continue to grow. So what are some things that you might put out there that we could do to make things a little bit better?
Yeah, so as the aging population just continues to absolutely grow and grow and grow, let's continue to educate ourselves on what elder abuse looks like. If you are a caregiver, ask for help when you need it. If you know someone who is a caregiver, offer to give them some reprieve and take a little bit of that burden off of them. Really educate yourself. Like we said before, scams are just constantly evolving and changing, so keeping tabs on that. And the Federal Department of Justice has a fantastic website on elder abuse and scams, and they constantly update those with the latest scams that are going out. So really just taking care of ourselves, taking care of others, staying aware and educated, and just keeping those close connections can really help us age well, live well, and protect ourselves from elder abuse.
That's K-State Extension Specialist in Adult Development and Aging in the College of Health and Human Sciences, Erin Yelland. For additional information, Extension has a publication, Elder Abuse and Neglect, What You Should Know, which describes the 6 common categories of elder abuse, warning signs, who's at risk, who's most likely to be an abuser, and how elder abuse can be prevented. That publication is available online through the Extension bookstore. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. and this is the K-State Radio Network.